Here's your report.
Oh, thanks, Jane. I wish I could hire someone just like you.
Try LinkedIn Hiring Pro. It's more than a job board. It's like the recruiter you always wished you had. Hiring Pro uses real-time insights to match your role to LinkedIn's unique network of professionals and delivers a short list of best fit candidates. You'll spend less time sorting applicants and more time talking to the right people.
Let's do it. You're irreplaceable, Jane, but another you would be great.
Hire right the first time. Post your job for free on LinkedIn today at linkedin.com/quality.
Energía baja, falta de concentración, niebla mental. You might be dehydrated. Gatorade Zero Powders han sido diseñados científicamente para ayudarte a mejorar el balance de hidratación en el cuerpo. Hechos con la mezcla número 1 de electrolitos sin colores ni sabores artificiales. Shop now online or at retailers nationwide. Gatorade hydrates better than water. Is it in you? Signos de dehidratación leve y moderada. Consulta a tu médico si los síntomas persisten.
The new Red Bull Dragonberry Energizer is now at McDonald's. Made with freeze-dried dragon fruit. And made to lock in. The all-new Energizer, now at McDonald's. 100!
Welcome to 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal. I'm your host, Brian Slagel. I'm the CEO of Metal Blade Records. The next time you're in Las Vegas, or if you currently live in Las Vegas or the Las Vegas area, you need to visit the Metal Blade Museum. Now, not only are there artifacts from Metal Blade artists like Metallica, Slayer, Cannibal Corpse, Gwar, Lizzie Borden, there's also artifacts from bands that we had something to do with as well, like Guns N' Roses, Megadeth, Alice in Chains, Deep Purple, Thin Lizzy, Alice Cooper, all sorts of stuff. So it's a really great metal museum. It's located right near the Strip in Las Vegas. Also, our retail store is also now in the museum. So you can go pick up your Metal Blade vinyl, CDs, collectibles, shirts, all sorts of cool stuff. Just go to metalblade.com/museum for all the details. We're down to the final 10. And again, it's not a countdown. It's just a bunch of songs that we talk about, but we had to make sure we got some good ones in. And this one is a really good one. This is Queensryche from their incredible record, Operation Mindcrime. We're going to talk about Eyes of a Stranger, kind of their signature song in terms of heaviness. Obviously, Lucidity is the big song, but to me, this is their signature song that got a ton of play on MTV and a whole bunch of stuff, and a record that really kind of changed metal. That's a legendary album. So it'll be super fun to do. We're going to talk production with our good friend, Mr. Jay Ruston, and then our very talented friend, who's won an Emmy, by the way, Jacob Bunton. But first, as always, we begin with the great Martin Popoff.
Good stuff, Brian. Queensryche, Eyes of a Stranger. To put this in context, so big band out of Seattle, a progressive metal band coming up kind of the same time as Fate's Warning, you know, the second wave after Rush kind of thing. We got a gold EP, we got a gold album for The Warning. Rage for Order goes gold. Operation Mindcrime, which this song is from. This album comes out May 3rd, 1988, produced by Peter Collins, goes platinum. Then we've got Empire, the big one, triple platinum, and even Promised Land goes platinum. That's kind of hard to believe, but that was a nice carryover from Empire. So this song is the second biggest song on the album. It was released as a single, but the biggest song, I think, is I Don't Believe in Love, although this is apparently the most played song in Queensryche setlist history, over 1,000 times as of April 2016. The track is the band's #1 most played song. Wow, in setlist history. Yes, okay. And it's also been on Greatest Hits and Sign of the Times, the best of Queensryche, which is also a Greatest Hits. So yeah, interesting track. It is the last song in the album. It's long. It's almost 7 minutes long. By the way, this album is a 59-minute long single album. I remember getting this on vinyl back in the day. It was a single album. And maybe that contributes to why I've never liked the production of this. It's got a very clean, clinical, which makes sense given the story, Peter Collins production, but it sounds pretty mid-rangey and compressed. And I think part of that is, my memories or my impression is cooked in because of getting this on vinyl and it being a very, very long album. So yeah, last track on the album, 6:53, 6 something, very long, almost 7-minute long song. It starts off pretty light. You've got this pretty light verse, clean guitar, watery. It starts off very, very Pink Floyd The Wall. You've got those same kind of ominous Pink Floyd The Wall chords, and you get the background chatter, which I often say was Pink Floyd's shtick. It's why they got as famous as they were, but little bits of spoken audio. I think that's one of the big things about that band. But yeah, sounds very ominous. And then we get into this pretty light verse. It doesn't sound like it's going to be that interesting a song, but then things open up, the clouds part, you get this great payoff for this stadium rock chorus. You got a double harmony vocal there out of Jeff Tate. And then we're into the next verse and we realize, this is a mechanism, a technique. The next verse is heavy. The guitars are now crunching in. You eventually get a nice twin lead guitar solo, pretty complicated one. And then you get these really tasty sort of guitar licks for the close. There aren't a lot of different parts to this song, even though it's on a progressive metal concept album and it's a long song. And then you get this slow fade, this cacophony of voices, very horror movie sounding voices, and this big revolution, and then just this spooky horror music, and then Jeff Tate really close to the mic with his "I remember now," that thing. So yeah, it definitely feels, honestly, it feels very much like a predecessor or a premonition of the general vibe of the Empire album. It feels like an Empire track, pretty much. But yeah, big famous song for Queensryche on an important album. The album that kind of made their reputation. Warning was a little wobbly in some ways, I suppose. I remember everybody thinking was a little bit of a letdown after the EP, and then Rage for Order was a little bit crazy. You got that photo shoot on the back, but this totally established their reputation again. I never liked the album cover. I never liked the story. And I'm not even a massive Operation Mindcrime fan, really. I like the next two more, but again, part of that might have been even the production. But yeah, the story is depressing, complicated. It suffers a lot of the same faults as Clockwork Angels and The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, I'd say. But there's been an Operation Mindcrime too, and there's been a band called Operation Mindcrime that Jeff Tate did. So yeah, it's definitely had a lot of cultural impact. But great track. Like I say, pretty much, I would say the song that endures the most. But I Don't Believe in Love was a big one too. But great track. Eyes of a Stranger, Queensryche.
You never know where Martin's going to go on these things. That was really interesting that he mentioned that he wasn't a fan of the story, which is everybody I know loves the story. It's such a brilliant story. And we'll talk a lot about it today, obviously, with our guests. He just mentioned something interesting about the one vinyl thing, because that definitely can mess up the sound when you're doing vinyl with that long. That's why a lot of people did short records in the 70s and 80s for vinyl. But listening to it now, like especially on CD and the reissues, which are not all crammed onto one thing of vinyl, I think the production is brilliant. So like I said, you never know with Martin, but always.
Here's your report.
Oh, thanks, Jane. I wish I could hire someone just like you.
Try LinkedIn Hiring Pro. It's more than a job board. It's like the recruiter you always wished you had. Hiring Pro uses real-time insights to match your role to LinkedIn's unique network of professionals and delivers a short list of best fit candidates. You'll spend less time sorting applicants and more time talking to the right people.
Let's do it. You're irreplaceable, Jane, but another you would be great.
Hire right the first time. Post your job for free on LinkedIn today at linkedin.com/quality.
Energía baja, falta de concentración, niebla mental. You might be dehydrated. Gatorade Zero Powders han sido diseñados científicamente para ayudarte a mejorar el balance de hidratación en el cuerpo. Hechos con la mezcla número 1 de electrolitos sin colores ni sabores artificiales. Shop now online or at retailers nationwide. Gatorade hydrates better than water. Is it in you? Signos de dehidratación leve y moderada. Consulta a tu médico si los síntomas persisten.
The new Red Bull Dragonberry Energizer is now at McDonald's. Made with freeze-dried dragon fruit. And made to lock in. The all-new Energizer, now at McDonald's.
It's interesting. Hi, welcome back again to the show. our good friend, the legendary producer, Mr. Jay Ruston. How are you, sir?
I'm great, Brian. Thanks for having me back.
Always love to have you on. It's always fun to talk production and producing with you because you know what you're doing. And this is a good one.
Yes, it is.
Operation Mindcrime, which according to Martin Popoff, I just found out he's not a big fan of the production on this, but he did mention that part of it was it's a 59-minute long record. And when it came out, it was on one piece of vinyl, that's a lot of music to cram on there. So it kind of makes it not sound as good. I think the record sounds great.
Well, I have a lot to say about this record and them in general and how they recorded this and where they recorded this.
Well, good.
A lot of Rush connection to this record.
Please share.
Mostly recorded at Le Studio, Morne Heights, Quebec, where Rush, of course, did from Permanent Waves onwards almost. I mean, obviously there's exceptions to that, and Peter Collins producing, who did produce quite a few Rush records in the later years. And Paul Northfield, their longtime engineer, also engineered on this record. But Jimbo Barton was like the big engineer producer on this record and, of course, did Empire after this.
Yes.
I don't know if they went to Le Studio Morne Heights because of Rush. I'm sure Queensryche were Rush fans, no doubt.
Oh, absolutely.
This record, I like the sound of it. It is unique sounding. The snare drum's very like reverby and kind of sampley sounding. And it's got a real heavy mid-range, this record, but the bass guitar tone is great. I know he uses Spectre basses, which we all love, the Newstead sound, the Rex sound, and just a nice, fat, thick bass guitar sound. The tightness of this band and this record is very obvious, when you listen to it, how good of musicians they were. I think this record was one of the first time they recorded probably all digitally as well. Everybody was switching to these 32-track Mitsubishi open reel machines, which Metallica used on the Black Album and so on and so forth. But yeah, I think this record sounds really great in its own way. It sounds nothing like the record before it or after it either. Mix-wise, it's definitely very aggressive.
Yeah, and that's the thing about Queensryche. Like all of their at least their first four, the best four, if you ask me, all had different sounds. Like Warning was kind of a classic, more metal production. Then Rage Forward is kind of all over the place with different sounds. And this one, same thing. They like to challenge things and have different guitar tones and not be like just your prototypical metal band, I guess. But same thing. I love the way this record sounds. I think it sounds incredible. I mean, the whole thing about it, I mean, the concept is great. The songs are amazing. It's just a legendary classic record.
Well, the song Eyes of a Stranger it's such a great song. When I first heard it on the radio in Detroit, which, at that time, Queensryche weren't getting a whole lot of airplay. But in Detroit, we had The Riff, we had Z-Rock, I think, which was out of Texas. It was like a simulcast kind of thing.
Yep.
And they played a lot of Queensryche, and they played this record, not just Eyes of a Stranger, but other songs as well. To me, it was his voice, the production of the chorus, like how much it lifts with the big harmonies and everything. And I know Peter Collins had a lot to do with that. But I think it just sounds huge, and it still stands up today. Having always listened to this record a few times a year, so I'm very familiar with the sound of it. And the only time a record like this is hard to listen to is if you're driving on the highway and you're in a car that isn't quiet. Like, say you're in somebody's beater Toyota or something and you got the windows down. This record is just going to sound like kind of a hazy sort of mid-rangey mess. But when you're in a great listening environment and or headphones, I think this record sounds great, but it's definitely got a lot of mid-range.
Yeah, and I don't mind that. I think it sounds good, but I have to go back and listen to the vinyl of it, the original vinyl, because he's probably right. It probably is a little bit condensed because to fit all that music on a vinyl was not very easy back then, and you have to reduce the dBs and kind of mash it up a little bit.
Yeah.
But listening to it now, whether it's on a CD or the new versions on vinyl or just where I've probably been listening to it most lately is on Apple Music. I think it sounds incredible, and just the whole record, just like everything about it to me is one of those magical things where, like I said, the storyline is great, the band performs great, the songs are great. It's kind of a magical record where it all kind of comes together. And for them, they had a couple of records that did pretty well, but they weren't, they were doing well, but they weren't getting really big. And then, of course, this record broke really on this song and the video on MTV, where MTV just decided to put it in heavy rotation. And all of a sudden, you're seeing the song, 10 times a day, and it got really big.
Absolutely. And I agree with you about the first two records. They're really good, and I'm a fan. But when this record came out is when I really took notice. What was that Sunday night show was it Metal Shop? Charlie something used to host? Charlie Kendall maybe was this guy's name. But that's how I discovered a lot of metal, growing up near Detroit. Was on Sunday nights, the Riff would pick up this metal shop show. They would play this record a lot. And so that's how I got my early exposure to Queensryche, because I didn't really know them up to this point. I went backwards, of course. And hearing it on the radio, especially this song, sounds really good on FM. And that was a thing. It was a big concern back then, obviously, is make sure your song sounded good on FM radio. And I can imagine the vinyl would have suffered for sure. I mean, 20 minutes aside max. And if this record was clocking an hour, that's an extra 20 minutes. You get an extra 10 minutes per side. Man, those songs on the inside groove of the vinyl must have sounded like fuzzy and terrible and no bottom end.
Yeah, hence why I think Martin didn't like the record as much, because his first listening to it was on the vinyl. Like I'll have to
only on vinyl.
I'll have to go back and listen to the original one. But yeah, I mean, everything else since then sounds really good. And it's an interesting song because it's not one you would pick as to be, like you said, a radio song or even like a big video song, but it's a great song in and of itself. And it worked. It worked as a video. It worked on radio. And you just never know sometimes how that'll work. And because I do love this song because it just kind of ties the whole thing together, ties the whole story together. It's got all the signature Queensryche stuff. It gets quiet for a while, and then it gets really heavy, and just vocal is low and then really high, and kind of all the good stuff about Queensryche is within this song.
Yeah, it has dynamics, which is often missing in modern hard rock and metal. So to have that great breakdown verse, and you really hear that nice crisp bass guitar sound in the verse especially. I really like the kind of reverby drums on this record. I think it works. It fits the vibe of the album, like the few times that Iron Maiden got airplay, like 2 Minutes to Midnight or Wasted Years. This song, to me, if they hadn't evolved into like the Silent Lucidity band and Jet City Woman band, I don't know if they would have been nearly as big if they would have stayed on this timeline, but I would have been good with it. I do love Empire, but this record, top to bottom, there isn't a skip song on this record.
No, it's good. And I listened to this record quite a bit too. I went down a rabbit hole when I was flying around a few months ago and just kind of listened to this record on each segment of flight because it was just right about the perfect time. And it's just such a good record. And you're right. I was listening to it the other day just to kind of refresh my memory for this. And you're right, the drums have a little bit of reverb on it, but it doesn't bother me. Like you said, it works. Like sometimes you have to have a little bit of reverb on, and this is certainly reverb on the drum time frame, but it doesn't sound dated to me now. It works. It
still works. And yeah, I think, if it was mixed now, honestly, if it was presented to me, say, hey, you're going to remix Operation Mindcrime, which I don't think they should do, but if it did happen, probably the only change I would really make is make the snare just a little punchier and less kind of, like the 80s sort of thing. But again, that's the charm of the record. It's like whenever they remix records that didn't need to be remixed, it's the first thing they do is get rid of all the ambience, and it kind of kills the vibe.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that sort of stuff. I mean, even records that need to be remixed, it just you can't redo it. It just sounds different. It just doesn't work. I've listened to a lot of these remixes, and it's just like I still like the original, even though the original is kind of weird. So I get why people do it.
Well, especially when it doesn't actually need to be done. Like if the album, some of the early Whitesnake stuff sounded great already, Keith Olsen and Martin Birch, and why did people bother remixing it? It didn't need to be remixed.
Yeah, well, artists and stuff, they're like, I hate this part of it or whatever. They didn't like it, so let's remix it. And then invariably it just doesn't, at least for me, it doesn't really work. And I think that's kind of the prevailing theory a lot of times. And this was definitely one. It's a classic record. Don't fix what's not broken, right?
I'm curious if this record was ever remastered. I think they did a new master in like 2003 for streaming or CD. But if it was to come up for remastering, a little bottom end tweak would be nice, a little warm up in the mids would be nice, but otherwise it's pretty much perfect. I wouldn't want to mess with it. I think it sounds great. There's just too many great people involved. You have a very tight band, a great producer. Peter Collins made very slick records all the time. So, and of course he did Empire, and that is extremely slick, much slicker than this. So yeah, I think it works.
Quick funny story about that. I heard this the other day, and it was actually on Maximum Metallic on Sirius XM, and Stefan Shirazi was on, and he was talking about the touring, because Queensryche on this album and also on Empire did a lot of touring with Metallica. mean, I probably saw them opening for them 30 times. But Stefan was telling this funny story that the guys from Metallica would play pranks on them. And like 3 or 4 in the morning, they call different band members and they pick it up and they go, Mindcrime.
Great.
Which is brilliant. Just absolutely brilliant. They did that like the whole tour. Like they'd wait another week and pick a different band member and then Mindcrime. It's so funny. But yeah, I thought that was a funny story where it was just so brilliant. But on back to the production part of it now. Do you know how much of it they recorded in Quebec?
I'm not sure. There's not a lot of detail out there, but I would imagine that they probably did the bulk of it there because the other studios that are mentioned might be where they mixed it. And I haven't heard of the other studio.
They spent a lot of time. I mean, they spent almost a year on this record. And I know that they recorded it in different parts and different pieces. And I think they predominantly did it in Quebec, but I know there's a couple other studios. But it took about a year to get this whole record done. It took a while for them to get it to where they needed it to be, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I think it was a studio in Pennsylvania somewhere, which was the other main room, which is maybe where they mixed. It's hard to say. As far as I've been told, a good chunk of it was done at Le Studio with most likely Paul Northfield at the helm, along with Jimbo Barton, because they're both credited as engineer.
Yeah, sorry. So let me just give you this little rundown here. Operation Mindcrime, this is off of Wikipedia, so take it for what it is. But Operation Mindcrime took almost 2 years to produce, with pre-production beginning as early as the spring of '87. The album was recorded digitally on a Sony 24-track tape, which you mentioned before, and also mastered in digital format. So it took a long time to make. That was pretty insane. So yeah, I'm sure it was a bunch of different studios, but yeah, almost 2 years. It was worth it though.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you also had the whole orchestral stuff too, which the great Michael Kamen did, which is pretty insane.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. Doesn't mention mixing, so maybe they mixed it at Le Studio as well. I mean, Terry Brown mixed all the Rush records in Le Studio that he produced, so they rarely went elsewhere to mix. But sometimes and the Police as well, I think when they did Synchronicity at Le Studio, they may have gone back to England to mix. But yeah, it's possible they mixed there because it was an SSL at that point. So, why not just mix there too?
I would imagine so. And like, obviously they had to record all the orchestral parts somewhere else too. So another reason why it took so long was, there's all that sort of stuff.
Maybe that was Pennsylvania. Yeah, because you're not going to bring an orchestra to Le Studio in Quebec. It was way too remote.
No, it's very small. Yeah, if you've seen all the Rush videos and stuff, yeah, it's a very quaint studio.
Yeah, not a huge place.
Yeah, so getting more information. Breaking news, getting more information. Yeah, it was mixed at Wieselert Studios in Hilversum, Holland. I do remember that.
Interesting. Okay.
When the record came out, they were talking about mixing it over there and
Whistlelord,
all that sort of stuff. So another reason why it took so long, you're basically recording in 3 different studios in 3 different countries. That'll take a minute. Yeah, there's quite a few other bands I remember had mixed in that time frame, had mixed over there, because I remember hearing about the studio and stuff. So it just was one of those, if somebody else mixed a record, that sounds good, so we'll go there and do it there. So
interesting choice to go to the Netherlands to mix when none of them are from there.
Thanks so much for doing this. Always great to hear from you, and appreciate you.
Great to be back, Brian. Thank you.
This is going to be...
Here's your report.
Oh, thanks, Jane. I wish I could hire someone just like you.
Try LinkedIn Hiring Pro. It's more than a job board. It's like the recruiter you always wished you had. Hiring Pro uses real-time insights to match your role to LinkedIn's unique network of professionals and delivers a short list of best fit candidates. You'll spend less time sorting applicants and more time talking to the right people.
Let's do it. You're irreplaceable, Jane, but another you would be great.
Hire right the first time. Post your job for free on LinkedIn today at linkedin.com/quality.
Energía baja, falta de concentración, niebla mental. You might be dehydrated. Gatorade Zero Powders han sido diseñados científicamente para ayudarte a mejorar el balance de hidratación en el cuerpo. Hechos con la mezcla número 1 de electrolitos, sin colores ni sabores artificiales. Shop now online or at retailers nationwide. Gatorade hydrates better than water. Is it in you? Signos de dehidratación leve y moderada. Consulta a tu médico si los síntomas persisten.
The new Red Bull Dragonberry Energizer is now at McDonald's. Made with freeze-dried dragon fruit. And made to lock in. The all-new Energizer, now at McDonald's.
A long introduction here, so bear with me. an Emmy award-winning musician, composer, songwriter, producer, multi-instrumentalist. He's worked with Mariah Carey, Steven Tyler, Smokey Robinson, The Doors, Mick Mars, Billy Idol, Quiet Riot, Steven Adler, Dave Ellison, Faster Pussycat, and much more. Jacob Bunton, how are you, sir?
Quite the introduction, man. I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Well, you've had an impressive career, so you deserve a nice introduction like that. So all good.
Man, I'm just a hillbilly from Alabama, dude. Got lucky.
Talented one at that.
Thank you, brother.
All right, so we're into the last 10 episodes of this podcast. And again, it's not a countdown, so we're not counting anything down, but it's obviously these are important songs that I feel should be talked about before we get to the end of it. And one of them being the song we're going to talk about today, or we've been talking about today, which is Eyes of a Stranger from Queensryche, from the incredible album Operation Mindcrime, which might, in my estimation, be the greatest concept album, at least in the metal world of all time. So what's your connection to Queensryche? When did you first
So my
hear them?
connection to Queensryche started with Operation Mindcrime, and I agree with you 100%. I do believe it's not just concept, but just one of the greatest metal albums of all time. So when I was a little kid, my mom won tickets off the local radio station for Metallica and Justice for All tour, and the opening band was Queensryche. So that was my introduction to them. You'll have to look up what month that tour actually was, but I want to say Operation Mindcrime had just come out, or it was just about to come out. And the thing that I really remember the most about the band, obviously, other than how freaking tight they were, just the tightest, most glued together band, was I remember being a little kid and realizing that Jeff Tate was not a normal singer. He had a 5-octave vocal range, and the dual guitar parts and all of that, it was just insane. So then obviously after the show, MTV started adding their videos, and Eyes of the Stranger, the song that we're talking about today, was the first song that ever charted for Queensryche on Billboard, which was really cool. And the same thing, that was always my favorite song on the record because it really, really, really showed off Jeff Tate's vocal range. Being a vocalist myself, he's, one of my heroes, somebody that I was just like, oh my God, how does he go from all alone now, for like the really low stuff to the really high stuff, just so effortlessly, and all the emotion behind it. And I've always been a really big sucker for big choruses and pop choruses and harmonies and just things that really, really lift. And that chorus was such a commercial chorus, even though it was a metal song. It just stuck with you. It was so memorable. Yeah, that Metallica concert, and then MTV, and then getting the Operation Mindcrime cassette and just listening to it front to back over and over, doing the same thing we all did, trying to figure out who killed Mary, and and listening to the whole story of Dr. X and Nikki and everything, and it's crazy because it was always unresolved in the album, who killed Mary, and they really didn't give you any more information other than what was the album until 2006 when they did the stage thing, and then it was revealed that she actually killed herself. Dr. X manipulated her into killing herself and everything. So the mystery remained for all that time and everything, and it's just, to this day, it just stands up. The sound sonically and everything else, so many records in that time period in the late 80s and everything were just soaked in reverb, and they really have a certain sound to them where you can pinpoint it to that era. But Queensryche, the way that they did this stuff, they did it all digital on a 24-track digital machine back then. Peter Collins produced it. I personally think Jimbo Barton, the engineer, was the magic, really behind a lot of the tones and everything. But my point is it just really stands the test of time because it still sounds great and fresh to this day.
Yeah, and to your point about the not knowing what the story being kind of murky, I was back then, I was really good friends with those guys because they toured with Metallica a lot. So I ended up hanging out with them quite a bit. And I would just politely ask Jeff, like, hey, so, give me a couple of things in this. He wouldn't say anything. He's going, that's all up to the listener. You know what people say. I get it. But there's a few nights, after we've been out drinking after a show or something, I go, come on, man, just give me something. Give me something. He's like, nope. It's all about the listener. So yeah. So for years I had no idea either. It used to drive me nuts. And I asked him quite a bit about that, but he's like, no, they didn't tell anybody. He didn't tell anybody. They didn't tell anybody about the whole thing until, like you said, in 2006, we're finally like, oh, it's resolved now. I can rest easy.
Exactly. And the song Eyes of a Stranger, I remember being a kid before they did the big reveal in 2006. I remember thinking that it probably was Nicky, even though he was in love and everything, because Dr. X had the mind control over him, and he had the heroin. He was the supplier for all that stuff. And I was like, because of the song Eyes of a Stranger at the end, it's like him looking in the mirror and he doesn't even recognize who he's become and everything. And he's questioning it himself. Did I do this? Yeah. So I came to the conclusion that it was him. So twist.
That's like same here, but it's such this the whole story is such an amazing story, and obviously every song on the record's great. I remember when I got an advanced cassette of it in our office in LA, and I told everybody, I said, "Don't bother me for the next hour." So I went into my office, closed the door, put the cassette in, listened to the record. I remember walking out and walking up to Mike Faley, still working for us, and I said, absolute masterpiece. Even on the first listen, absolute masterpiece. And I love this song because it really just kind of tie everything together. It's not just lyrically, but musically too. It's got every little bit that you like about Queensryche, the progressive stuff, the great solos, the kind of mellow parts. And like you said, Jeff's range where he's, pretty down low and then all of a sudden he gets really high again. And it just is, it's kind of the perfect Queensryche song. And yeah, I remember MTV played this video over and over and over and over again. I'd see it 2 or 3 times a day because back then I was addicted to MTV. So, and that's really what made the record as popular as it was. MTV did that for so many artists and certainly did it for Queensryche.
Absolutely. And I remember, so when I was a kid, I would read all the magazines, Metal Edge and Circus and Hit Parader and all the magazines that everybody did, eventually Rip, when it came out and everything. And I remember reading all the interviews about it, and Jeff Tate said the way that it came about is he was in Montreal and he was hanging out with a group of people that would openly talk about a revolution and talk about like all of these ideas. And he was a political guy himself, and upset with the way that how he felt things were going in the US and everything else. And so the concept came to him, and then he took it to the band. And I think it was at one of them's wedding or something is when they all got back together and then talked about it. And he had this notebook with all these stories and character development written down. And it was, I think, Chris DeGarmo that was like, this is amazing. Like, let's do this. I'm in. And the very first song, according to those magazines that they wrote for it, was Operation Mindcrime. But they didn't write the songs in order, obviously. But I remember reading that Eyes of a Stranger was one of the first 3 songs that they wrote for the record. But they knew what the concept was going to be. And so then they just had to figure out a way to put it all together cohesively, where it told the story and everything else. And Peter Collins and Jimbo Barton, I know also from those same interviews and stuff, that they helped them put it together. So they actually auditioned actors, for the segues between songs and everything for, Dr. X. And then, of course, Pamela Moore was from their hometown and everything. So they had seen her around, and then they flew her to the studio for Sweet Sister Mary and her parts and all that stuff. And as they went, they kind of found a way to bridge all the songs together with these segues and everything, and just made it seamless. And like you said, absolute masterpiece. It's just perfect. And I would imagine, that's probably how, an album like Pink Floyd The Wall was made or something like that, in to an extent. Yeah, absolute masterpiece.
Yeah, concept albums are always interesting. How people formulate them in their brain and then tell the story, and then the music follows. And Queensryche is an interesting band because each of those each of the first 4 releases were very different. You had the EP, which was pretty typical power metal sort of stuff, and the first album was just an accentuation of that, but in a much bigger thing. And then they did Rage for Order, which was a lot different. They were experimenting with different sounds and different types of songs, and they had a lot more mellow stuff. I love that record. And then this one comes out. It's a very cohesive record, put together perfectly. That, like you mentioned, the production is incredible. The songs all flow together perfectly, and you've kind of got all the best parts of Queensryche, the progressive band, the ballady, mellow stuff, and all this stuff just comes together. And it's just, there's not a weak song on the whole record. I mean, I listened to it again. I got into every once in a while I'll take a deep dive when I'm traveling, and I was on a bunch of flights. I think I listened to this on every flight I was on for about 2 weeks, just listening to the record over and over again, because it's just still so good.
Absolutely amazing. There's a lot of concept albums out there. There's a lot of bands that have done it, for sure. They're very hit or miss, but they knocked it out of the park with this one. Yeah,
100%. And yes, so happy for those guys to have. I mean, because they weren't struggling before this. They were doing very well, but they weren't at the top of the heap, so to speak. And then this record comes out and really changed it for everything. Changed everything for them. And certainly they've got kind of lucky in the fact that they were managed by Q Prime, who also manages Metallica. So they went out on countless Metallica tours, the one that you mentioned, and then the Black Album tour. I mean, I probably saw Queensryche with Metallica, I don't know, maybe 30 times or something like that. So those are fun times, and they're great guys too, super great guys, and happy they're still doing it today. So where and when did you, like, obviously you've been involved. I know you're a huge metal fan, but you've also been involved in all sorts of different types of music. Did you come from a really musical household?
No, I didn't. I grew up, it was just me and a single mom. Grew up a poor kid. When I say poor, like, food stamps, government housing, like just me and a single mom. And I would go over to friends' houses that had MTV, and that was like my escape. And it's like, I just was obsessed with music, obsessed with the radio, obsessed with metal. That was my first love. And it was so weird, man, because when I was growing up, either you liked metal or you liked alternative music or whatever. It was very like, that's not, or whatever. And I kind of loved everything. It's like I was, a massive King Diamond fan and a massive Metallica and Overkill and Testament and all of those types of bands. But on the same hand, I love Duran Duran and I love The Cure and like all these like really melodic bands and everything. So the household wasn't really musical, but my mom was a music fan and she loved music as well. And I remember my mom used to love to embarrass me when I would bring friends over to our apartment and everything, because when Danzig's first album came out, it was just on repeat. So every time I'd bring a friend over or whatever, the first time they'd meet my mom, she'd look right at them and she'd go, "Mother," and just start singing like Danzig songs. I'd be like, "Mom."
That's cool.
Yeah,
I like it. Yeah, I was the same way. Like I grew up liking a lot of different styles of music. I mean, obviously, metal. Once I got into metal, it became the main one. But when I was in high school, I used to go to all the different genres in LA. We were lucky we had a scene for a whole bunch of stuff. I loved like new wave. I go see, the Go-Go's and Oingo Boingo and Wall of Voodoo and all those bands. And then the punk rock scene with, the Germs and Black Flag and Dead Kennedys would come down from San Francisco once a month. So I got into all that sort of stuff. So even though metal's my main thing, I can appreciate a lot of other stuff as well. And yeah, I think it's good to have. That's why I think we have such a varied roster on Metal Blades. I kind of like all sorts of different things. So it's kind of fun to do that.
Absolutely.
So how did you learn to play instruments then?
So the way I learned to play instruments was when I was 11 years old. The projects that we lived in, there were some houses down the street. I went and knocked on doors and asked if I could mow lawns. And so I mowed lawns, saved up $60. There were little houses, little lawns. People would have lawnmowers. So I took $60 to my local music store, a place called Highland Music in Birmingham, Alabama, that's still there today. The owner, a guy named Don Murdoch, awesome dude. I said, look, dude, I'm 11 years old. I've got $60. I want to learn to play guitar. Do you have anything that you can sell me? And in the back of the shop, there was a guitar where the headstock had been broken off during shipping, and the brand was called Memphis. And he gorilla glued it back on and fixed it up really nice, sold me the guitar for $60. And I literally just sat in my room and just listened to the radio nonstop. And then I would, I was a little bit of a thief. I would go into Turtles Records and Tapes and steal tapes because I was stealing music way before Napster. But I was obsessed with music, and that's the way that I learned. And I would steal everything from Metallica tapes to Malice, License to Ill, anything that had a cool album cover or metal or something like that. I would get it, and I would just be obsessed with the guitar players and everything. And my favorite guitar player of all time is Steve Vai. First time I ever saw him was the Yankee Rose video, and like he just blew my mind. I was like, that's crazy. He makes his guitar talk, he slings it around his head, he does all this crazy stuff. And it's like, so that's how I got into it. And growing up in the South, we had every radio station under the sun because of country music, blues, like everything's right there. So and pop music, I would just flip through the radio dial and just listen to stuff.
So you were self-taught on the guitar?
Self-taught, yeah.
Wow. I can't play anything, so the fact that anybody can do it just by picking up a guitar and going, okay, I'm gonna learn how to play. That's amazing. Just amazes me.
Yeah,
part of my brain doesn't work apparently. I guess I don't know, but that's impressive. And then how did you go from being in Alabama to getting into the music business?
Being a poor kid, I would write songs all the time, and I went to a local studio in Birmingham, Alabama, a place called Synchromesh, and I talked to the owner. I said, "Hey, dude, I've got no money, but I'll be your janitor. I'll do whatever if I can trade for studio time." And he said, "Man, next week we're going to remodel the studio. So if you want to haul trash and do all that stuff, be on cleanup crew in the next few days, I'll record you." And he did. And he recorded a demo of 8 songs. And I didn't have a band. I just made up a band name, called it Wish, and just started sending the demo tape out. I got one of those musicians' guides to touring and promotion that had all the record companies, A&R names and addresses and all that stuff. And I just started mailing out packages and everything. And it got to the point where either I would get rejection letters or I would get the package returned with a stamp on it that says "will not accept unsolicited material." Finally got through one day, and I would call these people too. And it's like, back then you had the main switchboard, and then you also had the person's assistant that would answer the phone. So there was no getting through to them, but I was persistent. I just kept on and on and on. I finally called Interscope Records and looked in the Billboard book. A&R Anna Statman, I remember her name, and Interscope Records. It's like, "Yeah, may I speak to Anna Statman, please? Hold, please." Normally, the person's assistant would answer and say, "Anna Statman's office," or whatever, and you would ask to talk to them, and they would hang up on you pretty quick. Her assistant was on lunch break. She answered the phone, and I just went right into it. And I was like, "Hey, my name is Jacob Bunton. I play in a band called Wish. I'm from Birmingham, Alabama." And she just shut it down. She goes, "Whoa." She goes, "This is not how this works." I'm like, "Well, how does it work?" And she's like, "Well, you have to have a manager to, solicit the stuff." I was like, "I don't have a manager." And she said, "Well, then you have to hire a lawyer." I said, "I don't have a lawyer. How do you do that?" And she goes, "You pay them a retainer, and then they shop it to people like us." I said, "How much is a retainer?" So they usually start at about $5,000. I said, "I don't even have $5 to my name." She stayed on the phone with me for a little while and let me send in a tape. So she gave me her FedEx number. I sent her a tape. The next day, she calls me back just like she said she would. And she was like, "I'm going to give you some advice." And I said, "What's that?" I said, "First, did you like it?" And she goes, "No, I'm going to give you some advice." She goes, "A&R people at labels, we all have different genres and different things that we like." She said, "Did you even look at the type of music that I signed before you sent this?" And I'm like, "No, I just thought A&R meant the person that signs music." And she's like, "I'm the person that signed Rocket from the Crypt and Drive Like Jehu and like all these punk bands and stuff like that." She said, "Your tape sounds like Lemonheads meets Urge Overkill. This is not my thing," or whatever. I was like, "Oh, okay." So that was some great advice. And then a few days later, I read in my local newspaper a story about a guy named Milton Davis that was a songwriter that was from Birmingham. He no longer lived in Birmingham. He had lived in LA for the past 7 or 8 years. But the article was on him. There was no photo, no anything. The article was on him because he had a #1 song with an artist called Dion Ferris, where he was a songwriter. So I went to that local record store where I stole all my tapes and stuff and looked A&R, and it said Randy Jackson, the American Idol, Randy Jackson. So I decided to just write him a letter, and I lied. So, dear Andy, my name is Jacob Bunton. I play in a band called Wish. Currently, Interscope, Elektra, and Atlantic are interested in signing my band. But my good friend Milton Davis, who I'd never met before, which I knew that Randy would know who he was since he just had a #1 song with him. I said, my good friend Milton Davis told me not to sign with anybody until you hear this because he thinks that you'll love my songs. Luckily, Randy did not double check with Milton. He called my house 3 days later when he got the letter, and he said, yo, dog, any friend of Milton's is a friend of mine. Send me your package. I sent him the cassette. He gave me his FedEx number. He called me back the next day and said, yo, dog, this is sick. I love your music. Then he said the same thing Anna said. He goes, I don't sign rock. He goes, I'm the one that signed Mariah. I signed like the urban stuff or whatever. And I was like, oh. He said, but the guy right across the hall from me is John Kalodner. He signs all the rock stuff, Aerosmith, AC/DC, all that stuff. He said, he's going to love this, man. And he goes, I'm going to walk it over. He did. Kalodner got on a plane, came to Alabama, got some friends of mine to do the showcase with me, and the deal was offered. But there's another story that goes way deeper than that with an artist called Poe that was on Atlantic Records. There's 2 people that changed my life, Poe and Randy Jackson. Poe, I met her. She introduced me to Kim. It's a long story, but she introduced me to Kim Stevens, who was the guy that signed Collective Soul and Matchbox 20 and all that stuff. So before we did the deal with Columbia, put a band together, like I said, the first deal I did was with Atlantic. And then after we made the record, spent a ton of money and made the record and everything, we got dropped and then went back to Columbia and then did the deal with Kalodner. So that's how I ended up in that. And then Randy was the one that him and Kalodner both encouraged me to write songs for other people. They were like, we think that you have such a great sense of melody and write all these great songs. And so, Randy's the one that put me with Mariah and all kind of stuff. And then Kalodner was very encouraging. And then eventually I just got in the pop world and it just kind of snowballed and went from there.
That's insane. I love stories like that. I think and this is the one thing that anybody out there can learn that wants to get in. I think the key word you said was persistence. Because that's the thing is it's not easy to get into this world. And if you get shut down a few times, you just got to keep moving forward because at some point, just like you, at some point you're going to get the right spot and have it happen. So I love stories like that. It's great. How did you win the Emmy? I don't know very many Emmy award winners that are musicians.
Yeah, just doing a lot of stuff for television. So I do a lot. I score a lot of movies and do a lot of scoring and theme songs and stuff for television as well. So it's just one of those things that happen.
That's awesome though. It's cool. I have a lot of friends that are on sports and news and stuff that have Emmys, but or my friend Don Jameson has an Emmy as well. So
I love Don.
Don's the best.
Yeah, he is the best.
Yeah, that's totally amazing. What was the first concert you ever went to?
First concert that I ever went to was Beastie Boys, Fishbone, and Murphy's Law. They were on tour together.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
that's a real good one.
Tour. And then the second concert that I went to was it was Whitesnake, when it was the Whitesnake album, the self-titled record, and Great White was the opening band. And then right after that, there were a few in between, but that Metallica show was one of the first ones because we couldn't ever afford concert tickets. So we would have to win them off the radio,
sure.
Off the local station, or know somebody that won that didn't want to go to the show and stuff like that. So yeah, and then eventually, the Metallica show with Queensryche, and then Motley, Dr. Feelgood, that tour that came through, and so it was really cool.
That was a good one. So did you get to see when Queensryche did Mindcrime in its entirety live?
No, I never did. I just saw the DVD. So I owned I bought the box set when it came out that had the DVD with it. And then the live record and all that stuff.
Yeah, it was a fun show. It's cool to see stuff like that kind of, brought to life, so to speak, because some of it's a lot different than you expect. I remember watching it. Oh, I didn't realize that or expect that. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So what are you working on now? What you got coming out that you're excited about?
Yeah, so I just finished up with Stanley Simmons, which is Evan Stanley and Nick Simmons, the sons of Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons from Kiss. And we did some really, really cool stuff that I really, really like a lot. It's a lot different than I expected it to be, because I kind of thought when we got together and started writing it, I thought it would be rock. I thought that's what we would be doing. Those guys wanted to go as far away from Kiss as possible. And they're into the whole Laurel Canyon sound, the Eagles, Jackson Browne, that whole thing of Laurel Canyon and Troubadour, artists that used to play there. And I told them they need to do rock. And they're like, we're not doing that. We're doing this. And matter of fact, when we record this, we're going to use acoustic guitars. We don't even know if we're going to put drums on everything. So I went to the studio. The producers, Rob Cavallo, that did the Green Day records and My Chemical Romance and all that stuff. He's awesome dude. He saw their vision.
Quick story, and I'll let you finish. Rob Cavallo, when we signed to Warner Brothers way back in the day, Rob Cavallo was our A&R guy. And at that point, Rob had done nothing. He was a young kid. And I think we were his first project, really. This is way before Green Day or anything else. So I've known Rob since 1990, I guess.
That's amazing. Yeah, well, Rob saw their vision and everything, and the whole time, like, we're in the studio, we're recording the record and everything, and I just looked at them both and was like, man, I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong at this or whatever, and I'll be the first to admit when I am, because everybody loves it. Everybody's embracing what they're doing. I love it too. Just in my brain, I'm like it's got to be rock and roll, and but it ends up having a really cool rock element to it while using more. There's no auto tune on the vocals. Everything is live. It's just a organic sounding record that's pretty freaking amazing. So
yeah, I've seen them post some clips on it. It's pretty cool. I met Evan a couple of times. Strangely enough, Paul Stanley is really good friends with my buddy Chris Santos, the chef, because Paul's kind of obsessed with cooking, and they become good friends. So I've been over to Chris's house a few times for a few parties when Paul's been there and his kids have been there. So I ended up talking to them because I saw him play when they opened for Kiss, one of the other bands that his kids were in. Super nice guys, very smart too. I was impressed by how smart they were. But yeah, good for them. I've heard nothing but good things about it. So yeah. Do you know when it's going to come out?
Yeah, it comes out August 28th, the full record.
Nice. Yeah. Well, awesome, man. This is so great. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it. You're a legend.
Oh, thanks, man. All right, there you have it. Talking about the great Queensryche song, Eyes of a Stranger, off the incredibly classic Operation Mindcrime album. Thanks a lot to the very talented Jacob Bunton for being with us. Of course, our old friend Jay Ruston on the production, Mr. Martin Popoff, Lizzie Borden for our theme song, and our producer who makes the whole thing roll, Mr. Christian Blatt. We'll see you guys next episode.
100!
This episode is brought to you by ChatGPT. Hey, it's Bill Simmons from the Bill Simmons Podcast. Have you guys heard about ChatGPT work? It's the new way to use ChatGPT for bigger multi-step projects. And when you need more than just answers, give ChatGPT work access to your apps and files, and it can create real work documents like spreadsheets, slides, and structured reports. Get started at chatgpt.com by selecting work mode, available on Plus and Pro plans.
Ouch. This knee is killing me, but I can't stop training. The marathon is in 2 weeks.
Let's get on ZocDoc and find a doctor to take a look at that for you.
Okay.
Here's a review. Dr. Craddock really takes his time.
No, I don't have time.
What about Dr. Charles? His patients say he can help find a quick fix, and he's in network.
Great, now we're talking. Book it.
Booked. 1 mile down, 19 to go.
Bring it on.
You've got options. Download the ZocDoc app today.
I'm not giving up.
I am selling the building.
The final season of FX's The Bear.
The restaurant is flooded.
Everything's either going to be okay.
No, stop!
Or not.
We are outgunned and we are outmanned, but we have each other.
FX's The Bear, the final season. All episodes now streaming on Disney+.